It's the most wonderful time of the year. The time of the year when all that work you've done listening to our other show, Cordkillers, which told you what devices to get, what services to subscribe to, lets you sit back and relax and enjoy all of the television shows you love. And that's why we do Spoilerin Time. That's what this show is called, where we watch shows and then Brian and I talk about them and spoil the crap out of them with no regard. We just spoil, Brian.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to spoil who the winner of the winter movie draft is going to be. Congratulations, Tom Merritt! Unverified sources who are sitting in my exact chair and speaking at this moment have confirmed, based on the reviews that Rogue One sneak previews are getting, it's the best movie ever since the first one, and it's going to make all the money on the planet.
Since the horse first ran, since
women
first poured out of a factory,
since train left the station, since the
Lumiere brothers first began,
since the men went to the moon.
So it's getting good reviews. I hadn't really noticed.
You hadn't noticed. Get out of here. And by the way, I'm so excited.
I'm still upset. I'm upset, Brian.
Why? Because it did make all the money on the planet?
Well, it hasn't made any money yet.
Okay, it's not going to make all the money on the planet?
We don't know. We don't know. It's not out. Domestic ticket sales have not been announced. But you know what has been announced? My movie Kidnap is out of the movie draft.
Yeah, what a tragedy. Surely you're going to lose now that your $5 game dollar investment in Kidnap. Well, what, pray tell, will you get in exchange for it?
Amityville: The Awakening, which comes out January 6th. Actually, I prefer this because let's be honest. Was Kidnap going to make any difference? No, I just wanted to make sure I didn't, not spend my money in the movie draft. So at least now, instead of going Kidnap, what's that about again? I can say Amityville: The Awakening. Hey, that's hilarious.
Hey, so a couple of quick Star Wars notes. Some of you guys know I'm an unabashed fanboy of Gary Whitta's work, who wrote the original script for Rogue One. I followed him ever since he was editor-in-chief of PC Gamer magazine back when I was in college, and he had a podcast called Game Theory where they would, much like Cordkillers, we go over the movie draft numbers. They would go over is it the MPD numbers for video game sales?
Yeah, it probably was back then.
And talk about the launch of the Nintendo Wii and stuff. And then he wrote the Book of Eli, and I read his book Abomination. To see this, I'm really, really excited about it. But on his Twitter feed, he I don't think this is a spoiler, but somebody had tweeted a picture of them watching A New Hope again. So you just see Luke Skywalker looking out over Tatooine. He says like pre-gaming for Rogue One, and Gary Whitta said, "This is literally the best way you could prepare for the movie. Just trust me on this." So
really?
I don't know what that means. I mean, obviously this takes place right before the original for A New Hope. But my guess is that it just means that you will be reminded of elements that it will feel like a more familiar, close, you know what I mean? Like, because it has been a couple of years since I've watched A New Hope.
I watched A New Hope last year because I was doing Pretend I'm Dumb about Star Wars.
Right.
But I watched it in that weird headspace of like, okay, pretend I know nothing except for the 3 prequels so far, which I've watched. So I haven't really, I don't even know the last time I just sat down and watched it.
Yeah. Doggone it, I had another Star Wars. And then my other thing I wanted to say about Star Wars is if you want a fun diversion, I'm going to plug the Weird Things podcast. Yesterday, we did a whole episode saying how could the tech of Star Wars work? Like humanoid robots with various personalities. Why would you design robots with various personalities? Why not design them all the same? And we came up with scenarios where that would be advantageous. And, the Force, how could that work? And one of the tough ones was how faster than light travel, or they say the jump to light speed, right? They say to go to hyperspace to go to light speed. That one's a problem because it breaks relativity. And I'm pretty excited about the solution I came up with, which is, they say it's a galaxy far, far away. They don't say how big the galaxy is. What if it takes place in a galaxy the size of our solar system, something where you could travel at light speed and get from one side of the galaxy to the other in 4 or 5 days, and everything takes place just in there.
It's a lot of planets to pack in, but it's not impossible.
But no, they're small people. Like everybody is
they're just tiny people.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Uh-huh.
I thought it was great.
I didn't get the tiny people part. Now it's brilliant.
It's just
brilliant.
a really tiny universe. They're only going the speed of light.
Like, it's not just a small universe. It's small people and small planets.
Correct.
In a small universe.
Flying small ships and having small battles.
Atoms are huge to these people. They're like, whoa.
Ooh, that would also explain how the Force will work, because they'd be able to take advantage of quantum physics because they would be much closer to it because they're so tiny.
Yeah. They actually feel magnetic force.
Exactly. They really can feel the Force. They feel connected to it. Look, I'm onto something here.
It's getting better and better.
I'm on to something.
Anyway, real quickly, back to the movie draft before we wrap up here. What came out this weekend was La La Land in 10 theaters, 5 in New York, 5 in LA. So we don't even have proper numbers. It was in the hundreds of thousands. But apparently, compared to other movies who have done that limited release for their first before they go wider, it did well. So it bodes well for it eventually. That's Justin Robert Young's movie. And Office Christmas Party, which is Milango's, did 16.8 million. Actually, it's pretty respectable for that in its opening weekend. This week, there's just that one movie coming out.
That one movie. You won't even say its name for fear of jinxing yourself.
Jinxing.
You're gonna get I'm gonna say what, 180 first weekend.
I don't know.
Maybe?
What did Force Awakens get in the first week? Because I think this will be less than that.
I think it will be pretty close.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, meanwhile, we will spoil Rogue One next week on this very show.
Yeah. Meanwhile, let's jump into the Netflix original.
Yeah. So in the meantime, we were looking for something besides Justified to talk about this week. And Brian and I had a conversation yesterday and hit upon the Brazilian sci-fi Netflix original 3%. And we both watched the first episode. Brian, go first. What did you think?
I loved the fact, as we talked about in Cordkillers, we talked about the fact that, mini shows take a while to unveil their mystery. It's like all of season 1 of Westworld, the first 9 episodes were apparently, the backstory leading up to the pilot, which they finally showed at the end of the season. Whereas this, it got right to the point. It got right to the point, and it was self-contained, and it had a good twist at the end. It very quickly made you realize that this was a game of machinations and of playing other people, and that there is what all the goals look like on the surface. What everybody's intent looks like on the surface is not necessarily what it actually is. And part of it is, for example, we very clearly have this guy who cheats to get past one of the tests, and he gets caught cheating by what was the guy? What was Ed Harris's name in the Truman Show?
I don't remember.
You remember he's the guy playing God up there in the sun or moon? They'll tell me.
So you're talking about Ezekiel in
there. You go, Ezekiel in the show. But I mean, he reminds me he's clearly playing God, right. Up there. But he sees it happen and just says, "Hey, man, you don't know what my criterion is to bring in the 3%, because of course everybody all thinks it's just about being the best and the brightest and so on." He very clearly is made out to be a bad guy. And it looks like he's embracing the bad guy role, but then you realize that even that is kind of playing for sympathy in a weird way when he gets his ass handed to him. And of course, our kind of main character, I assume she's the one that we're following the most and the one that we're most empathetic to.
Shelley
turns out to be the most, I don't want to say maniacal or scheming, but certainly the most committed. Like, she full on sends this other girl to her death, and she was the guilty party. And yet you still get the idea that on the one hand, it looks like, okay, she's a villain, but on the other hand, you think she seems very committed. It seems like something very terrible happened to her, that she swore this oath, and she's clearly regretful. She takes a moment to just break down and cry after sending that girl off, but she believes so much in the cause, the literal cause.
Yeah, I have very mixed feelings about this episode, because on the one hand, it feels very cheap. There's a lot of very cliche lines, some of which may just be lost in translation because I'm listening to the English dubbed version. But some things are just like really like block construction of like, I'm going to do a futuristic conspiracy. So I need a guy who's under investigation from the corporation who doesn't play by the rules upstairs. And I need to have, people who are in an impoverished situation and are dying to do anything to get in. And I'll have an honest one and a fake one and a sad one and a happy one. And so some of it felt like that. And then they got to the scene where you're talking about they pulled the two people out because they had identified them as being from the block in the favela where they knew that the insider that was trying to infiltrate was from. And they had me guessing. I had no idea which one of them it was. And right up until the end, when we finally learned, like, oh, it's her for sure, because they show us the flashback. I was fooled and I loved it. I was like, that girl in the flashback is much more likable, right? Shelley up to that point was kind of whimpery and like, well, I know she's our main character, but wow, she doesn't seem to have a lot of oomph. And it turns out, oh, that's on purpose. That is how she has been instructed to play it. And she looks super confident in the behind the scenes. And yet she definitely has depth. And you see that right away. Like you said, she starts weeping. And so that one scene made me buy the entire episode, even when a lot of the rest of it felt a little B-movie to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'll tell you what, though, I'm, by the way, as we talked about before the show, I am watching it with the English translation, but I also, because I always have closed captioning on, I'm watching it with the translation on there.
They don't match.
They don't match, and I love it for it. It's like when something happens and they don't match, it's like the superposition. It's like I'm getting a gestalt of the real essence of what it probably sounded like in Portuguese to a native speaker, but I'm getting it very directly because, one may be a more poetic translation and the other may be more literal, and between the two, it takes me along. I do want to give the highest commendation to some of the aesthetic choices in this. Like, they do some weird stuff that just works, and I know it was super, super cheap. Like the blindfolding they do, painting the black goop over their eyes to lead them around so their eyes are sealed shut, and then they peel it off, and it's just silicone, it's just latex, it's whatever, but it leaves these dark rings around them, making them look like they're tired and damaged and whatever. Also, when they cut to her in the favela, she's talking to the guy from the cause, and he's saying like, oh yeah, no, make sure to whimper a lot, hold back the tears, they eat that shit up, and in the background, first of all, he's got this stuff on his face that is never explained. It looks like some kind of damage, like all of his face looks like one big scab on the side of it. And in the background, there's just thousands and thousands of numbers, hash marks, 123/5, 123/4/5. And none of that is overly addressed or whatever. You could tell it was on a limited budget, but where they rather than spend money, they invested effort in a bunch of really haunting visual images that I liked an awful lot.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I'm not sure I want to carry this all the way through or not based on that first episode. It didn't hook me, but there are good things in here. And I think maybe it's one of those series where if you push yourself to invest in it, it will start paying off, because that's how I feel about the episode itself. Well, I just wasn't into it at first, but because I persisted through the whole episode, wow, did it pay off? Because suddenly I went from thinking that Shelley girl is kind of whimpery and a weak character and not a very good actor to, wow, she's an amazing actor. And I love this character because this character is super deep.
So as somebody who's finished it, because we're not committing to nothing here. We got other shows on our plates.
Sure.
But as somebody who made it all the way through, given our feelings about what we saw in the first episode, because I'm with Tom, I wasn't blown away, and some of it did feel kind of like, like now it's time for this guy and the next act and so on. Is it worth keeping going with, or?
So I talked about that a little bit on the Cordkillers show where I recommended it a few weeks back, where it is a little more traditional in that sense, where you do have people who are kind of filling these specific roles. And so you've got kind of a traditional ensemble cast, but also you get a good amount of depth with pretty much all of them. And so I think if you liked seeing that look into Michelle's kind of backstory, you will get more of that on a lot of different characters. And sort of having it be a little backloaded with not necessarily twists, but kind of turns and large, like these episodes are really well self-contained because a lot of them focus on the trials that they go through in the test. So you do have sort of single episode arcs that when I compared it to Westworld kind of doesn't have that. If that's something that you did enjoy, and if you feel like you can, if you feel like you could get into the characters, I would say give it another episode, because episode 2 does one of the first like kind of deeper dives into these characters. And having seen where the final bits of the season go, I think that there is a lot to chew on, and it has a lot of potential for another season.
Oh, right on.
So I don't want to spoil anything, and I'll try to just keep it at that. But
sure,
I think I agree that this first episode, I remember having some of the same impressions of like, okay, well, this is kind of looks cheap and maybe it's a little whatever. But I still managed to make it through all 8 episodes. And I think that's another good thing, is that it's kind of a shorter run of only 8.
Oh, you know what? Knowing that the finish line is that much closer actually really does encourage me to keep going.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And I listened with the original Portuguese audio because I'm not a scrub.
I see.
But when I did listen to the English dub for a little bit, I did notice that the dub picked up more things than the subtitles did, like a lot of little incidental audio and like background voices and stuff. But at the end of the day, I still just preferred the subtitles.
The natural, yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I would say if I was in a position to dedicate, an hour at a time to give it my full attention, I probably would have done the same. But having it on while I'm kind of doing other stuff, which I know is a cheat, but also it also gives it kind of a boost in rating, in that I'm not constantly criticizing every. That's the problem is when I go see a movie, I'm giving it such my full attention that I'm noticing every little thing I don't like. Whereas when something's on a small screen and just on, I give it a pass on a lot of stuff.
The other thing that's interesting, I think, in our discussion here is that we haven't talked about the premise hardly at all, and I think that is actually to the credit of what they've done with the characters, which is, it's kind of Divergent,
Hunger
slash
Games.
Logan's Run, slash the island. Like, it's been done a million times. There's a mass of humanity, and they go through trials, and the promise is that 3% of them will be selected to live offshore, which is a better life. But honestly, that part of it is not even important in this first episode. What's important is what's motivating these people to do stuff.
Man, and I don't want to harp. I don't want to annoy people, but like, this first episode had something that Westworld never got around to in its whole first season. Is a simple thing for me to hook on to. Like I get it. There's a test. I hope this guy wins because I like his face. I don't like that person's face. I hope he loses. Sure. And I even though it was a minor investment, and even though I was instantly able to abandon it for the much more interesting question of like, well, why is he doing that or whatever? At least there was something to glom onto. That to get me through it.
Yeah, it's got very tangible stakes in each episode and over the season, in that you want to see if they make it through, who makes it through the test.
Right.
And I think it delivers. Like, it is a little more traditional, but that's the reason why that works by having different archetypes, is that they fulfill.
By having a protagonist.
Oh, Jesus.
It's a different type of story, and I don't have a problem with the Westworld story at all. I liked the way they told it. I have some problems with the way they told it, but I think it's a legitimate form. This is a different form. This is a more straightforward, let's introduce characters, and in some ways that bothers me, where I'm like, yeah, okay, you're giving me this again, like no spin. It's very this character, this bad guy, this overseer. But the characters are good enough that it doesn't just make me press the stop button.
Yeah, interesting.
All right, shall we go to the characters of Justified?
Yeah.
Episode 9 of season 4, in which we find out who Drew Thompson was.
And you know what?
It turns out he was in our hearts the whole time, Brian.
Well, and that's really the only way it could possibly pay off, given
the only
the
way
fact
they could justify this season.
Oh, you did it! You did it! You son of a biscuit! Yes, that it is. And they did so in a pretty good way. They pulled a Ben Linus. They took an unassuming minor character that was under our nose the whole time. They verbal Kented us. Not that he's a maniacal mastermind, but they took somebody who was the most unassuming, the most filthy, insignificant part of the story, and yet had a reason to be there, because after all his job was to be the pawn of Boyd Crowder, right? And Boyd Crowder showed him kindness on that one thing and saved his life, and for that he's thankful, and that's why he's gonna go run for sheriff, even though he's gonna die of the cancer, as we all know, because he said it and we all believed it. And now apparently I'm beginning to think this guy's a liar. I'm beginning to think he's not the most honest sheriff we've ever seen.
He doesn't have cancer at all. Not even a mole. Nothing. This season is filled with a lot of episodes that feel like they're self-contained, except that their plot isn't. So in this one, it's him trying to take the guy to the new prison, which wouldn't last on its own, because we don't care about that guy if it's not for the hunt for Drew Thompson. And we don't really understand why this is a problem for Art if Raylan's dad hadn't been killed by him. So, this is all relying on the backstory for its importance, but otherwise it's just an adventure romp until we get to that big reveal.
There was some great moments before the big reveal where, for example, Raylan shows up and Art asks, what his dad said before he died. And not as a joke, not as a snide, sarcastic thing, but as if to just put the issue to rest, he flat out lies and says, he was like, told me he loved me, said he was sorry for what he did wrong. And I think it was Art he was saying that too.
I got that as sarcastic.
Well, I
got that as, as well as I do that what I'm saying isn't true, but we're going to pretend that I'm just going to say it because that's what you do.
Well, I took it as, I'm going to say these words, which will either shut you up about it and you're not going to ask me about how I feel about it, and or you're going to realize that I'm lying through my face, in which case you're going to realize this is me saying I don't want to talk about it. Does that make sense?
I 100% agree with you. That was the point.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to say the magic words that make you not talk about this anymore.
That puts this to bed and says it's a closed box, not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, for sure. Nice temper tantrum from Art too. We haven't had.
Oh my God, it was so believable. Like, I mean, and what's funny is I remember thinking, I watched that scene twice, and I remember thinking, on set, I bet that was electric and awkward. And I remember looking at, I forget the guy in the cubicle over from Raylan's name, how he's, playing it all cool. I'm like, I don't know that I could play like I don't care. Like, I'm just rolling my eyes. I'm watching Art lose his goddamn mind.
Yeah, I'm like this. I'm leaned away.
Yeah, right?
And we get a subplot from him as well in tracking down Colt.
Yeah.
Which dovetails into the other subplot, which is Boyd discovering that Colt didn't kill Ellie Mae.
Yeah, that's right. And do we see Ellie Mae this episode?
No, she never shows up.
Okay, so we know that Drew Thompson, I guess we'll call him now, Drew Thompson has her squirreled away, likely as leverage against Boyd. That was an insurance policy. So what we originally took as him defying his boss out of the goodness of an old man's dying heart, in fact, is let me get a little leverage here. And
was a shrewd, calculated move.
Yeah. Which
absolutely.
It's great because now we finally have a third player, and it's making us go back and reevaluate everything he's done up until this. Although they don't establish what it is that has inspired this zealot-like devotion in people who make promises to keep his identity a secret. We saw Arlo literally on his deathbed refuse to share the identity of Drew Thompson. We saw the other dude try to kill himself, try to commit suicide, and then they're sitting next to Drew Thompson, talking code. He's speaking flatly, but he's also sending signals to Drew that he's like, "I will die before you get that name out of me." Right there in front of him. I want to know. I'm intrigued. What it is about him that causes this kind of psychotic devotion.
I hope that gets explored. Because with Arlo, you could write it off as like he's just stubborn and doesn't want Raylan to win.
He's a jerk.
But it turns out it's more than just that. Because this guy from this episode would not have done it just to spite Raylan. He may not like Raylan, but he doesn't not like him that much to jump in front of a truck, right? Like, so there's something else going on. I thought it was another nice touch that he didn't leave, even though he got tossed the keys, because he's like, where am I going to go? I'm in a big orange jumpsuit. I'm realistic. I really was just protecting Drew. And now that Drew is out of here, I don't get nothing to lose anymore.
Yeah. Wow. It'll be interesting to see where it goes. And meanwhile, Gambling Man is shouting, the boys like the plot twist. They're hooked.
Yeah, no, this is what we were waiting for this whole season. It's a little late in the season. On the other hand, I guess you kind of need to play that card close, or it doesn't have the punch that it has if you reveal it too early. So
well, and what's funny is in the direction of that moment, they made it such a quiet, downbeat moment that, and granted, I was watching it right before going to bed. And so, and in fact, I didn't finish the episode, but when I went back after we talked, Tom, I had gotten past that moment, but it was just so casual that I didn't even notice it. And it wasn't until,
it
wasn't until I went back to like, oh, that's right, this part that I saw it. And I liked how subtle all of that was.
Yeah. And it sets us up for some good justified romping around, hunting for Drew Thompson, Boyd and Raylan once again hunting after the same thing in competition. And this time we actually have a person that we know exists that they're hunting for. So I've actually gone to looking very much forward to the next episode.
Have they established why Preacher Guy's widow sister is still around? Is she doing anything that matters? At the very basic, she was around so that she could tip off Boyd that Ellie Mae wasn't dead, right? But it seems like they could have covered that a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, I guess they had her on contract and she's a good actor. I'm not sure why.
This, you know what?
Why?
Previous to this episode, I would have said that might have been the case. But now I'm beginning to think that they don't do things carelessly on Justified.
Well, yeah. I mean, the only thing that seems careless, why would she still have the church set up? Right? The church, when they go visit her.
She's taking it down just very slowly.
She's real slow. Things don't move that fast in Harlan. So... Yeah, I don't know. There may be more to her story. That is a fair point. Than just being around.
Well, congratulations, everyone who told us. I'm not going to say that I forgive how slow everything was up until this point, but I do see the potential for a very exciting, fast-moving second half of the season.
Yeah, and at least that slowness doesn't feel like a total waste now.
No, correct.
At all. All right, thanks everybody for watching or listening. We will spoil you again next time, both Justified and Rogue-wise.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.